Yes, how are we all? I hope all is well. My name is Sachin, and this is the Total Cricket Podcast, episode 38. Today, I'm going to be reviewing the first ODI between India and Australia, so let's get right into it. India won this one by 26 runs on the Duckworth-Lewis method, and as a result, they take a 1-0 lead in the series. This is a limited overs tour between these two rivals, 5 ODIs followed by 3 2020s. I'm not a big fan of purely limited overs tours. I feel they lack context without the test matches preceding them. Although I do feel that the rivalry between these two teams adds much needed spice to this series. Now I'll begin with the team news. And India, they made one change from the last ODI they played. That was in Sri Lanka. Shardul Thakur dropping out, and in came Hardik Pandya. Australia, they went in as expected. Hilton Cartwright making his ODI debut. He opened the batting with Aaron Finch missing out due to injury. Pat Cummins, James Faulkner, and Nathan Coulter all came back into the team after missing out on the squad for the Champions Trophy. Now let's get into the recap. And India, they won the toss and surprisingly, under Virat Kohli's leadership especially, elected to bat first, but they did a pretty good job, it must be said, on a pitch that was not as flat as the ones you'll usually see in India. It was a little bit uneven, and the fast bowlers were getting some bounce out of the surface. So it was a very good effort from India to get to 281 for 7 in their 50 overs, but it didn't start well for them. They were reduced to 11 for 3 very early on, thanks to Nathan Coulter, but then Rohit Sharma and Kedar Jadhav did provide a little bit of stability with 28 and 40 respectively, but then they fell in quick succession to leave India at 87 for 5, and at that point it was all Australia. But MS Dhoni and Hardik Pandya came together and put on a fantastic stand for the sixth wicket of 118 to put India back into pole position in the game. Hardik Pandya was at his electric best, 83 of 66. He made MS Dhoni cool, calm, collected, as always, 79 of 88 for him. And then even when Pandya went, Bhuvneshwar Kumar came in to assist Dhoni, pushed that total up to that 180 mark. Bhuvi made 32 not out of just the 30 deliveries. So an excellent finish to the Indian innings, and it was certainly a par score on that surface, very much defendable. The Australian bowling, Nathan Coulter was the pick of the fast bowlers, pick of the bowlers full stop. He took 3 for 44. Pat Cummins was unlucky, but again he troubled the batsman. He went wicketless, but he only went for 44 runs. James Faulkner copped a bit of flack in his return to ODI cricket. 1 for 67 were his figures. Marcus Stoinis did a good job in the middle overs. He took 2 for 54, and Adam Zampa copped the full brunt of Hardik Pandya's onslaught. He got 1 for 66. Now, the Australian innings was played in completely different circumstances. Rain intervened at the halfway mark, and Australia's innings was reduced to just the 21 overs. It was lucky that the rain held off when it did. If it stayed for another 15 minutes, the game would have been abandoned. So, thankfully, there was a result in this game, but the rain meant that Australia needed 164 runs to get in 21 overs, and they fell short of that by some distance. They only managed 137 for 9. David Warner was the only contributor in the top of the order. He made 25, but off 28 balls. Glenn Maxwell provided a brief moment of belief for the Australians. 39 off 18 he made, but then it quickly fell away. James Faulkner provided a little bit of respectability at the end of the game. 32 off 25. But apart from those three, no one else made it into double figures for the Australians. The Indian bowling, Bhuvneshwar Kumar and Jasprit Bumrah were excellent as always, 1 wicket between them. Hardik Pandya did a good job as well. He picked up 2, and he was man of the match for his all-round efforts. Kuldeep Yadav and Yuzvendra Chahal, they made sure of the results by strangling Australia in the middle overs. 2 wickets for Kuldeep and 3 for Yuzvendra. Australia struggled greatly with their batting. India comfortable winners in the end, although it didn't look like that at the start of the game. So now let's get into the breakdown, and I'll start with the Indian innings. The Indian innings, as I said, got off to a shaky start with Rahane, Kohli, and Pandya falling to Nathan Coulter to the new ball. Coulter was getting it to swing away very nicely to these right-handers, and they all perished in a similar manner. Rahane was slashing at one, and he got an outside edge to Matthew Wade. He was out for 5 off just the 15 delivery, so he struggled, never really got going, Rahane. He is, at the moment, substituting as an opener for Shikhar Dhawan, who is currently unavailable. Now, Rahane, is he the man to be India's backup opener? We have to remember that he was the man of the series in the ODI series against the West Indies just a few months ago, but then he only played one game against Sri Lanka in that series, failed, and now again he's failed here. I think it would be very harsh to drop Rahane after these 2 failures, but I have to say that he is on thin ice now because he's not providing impetus at the start of the innings. When you've already got a guy like Rohit Sharma who can be a slow starter, that doesn't help the Indian cause. KL Rahul is in the squad, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see KL come in if Rahane struggles in the next few games. But certainly, I'd give Rahane at least the second ODI, probably the third. And if he fails in both, then I would say maybe it's time to look at KL Rahul. But that's the issue that Rahane has, is that he doesn't have the ability to score as quickly as Rohit Sharma or Shikhar Dhawan. And I think that KL Rahul is probably a more explosive option at the top of the order. So that's certainly one to look out for the Indian batting. Virat Kohli got a duck, a rare duck for the king of ODIs. And for Kohli, this was his one weakness exposed by Coulter. The ball swinging away outside off stump. Kohli, he played and missed at the ball before in the previous over. Coulter comes back the next over. Kohli slashes at one, gets a thick outside edge, and Glenn Maxwell takes an incredible one-handed catch to get rid of him at backward point. Now for Kohli, this is his Achilles heel. On that 5th-6th stump, outside off, swinging away, he is susceptible, and it is proven to be his big issue throughout his whole career. And this is the one thing that he has to work on. The rest of his batting is virtually perfect, but this thing, opponents are going to try and hone in on because it's his only weakness, to be honest with you. And with tours coming up in places where the fast bowlers will fancy their chances, that is South Africa, England, and Australia, Virat has to work on that. Now, Manish Pandey, he also got a duck just jamming down on one from Coulter, and he got an outside edge through to Matthew Wade. Now, it's interesting with the number 4 and 5 slots for India, they are not settled at the moment, and there seems to be a 3-way jostle between Manish Pandey, Kedar Jadhav, and KL Rahul, but I feel that KL is more suited to play at the top of the order, so I think that Pandey will get a good go in this series, and I don't see why he shouldn't. He's a good batsman, and he got out early in this one. That doesn't mean that he can't play in this position. Let's see if he can get some runs in the next few games. Now, Rohit Sharma, he struggled to get going in this one, although he did fight 28 off 44 for him. We know with Rohit that against good fast bowling, when the ball is swinging early, he isn't the best starter, susceptible, and he struggles to score quickly against the fast bowling early on, and that proved the case today. And then the dismissal against Stoinis, the ball wasn't really there, way outside off stump, tries to hook it, and he gets a big top edge and holes out. For Rohit, that's his main issue, is starting, but once he gets going, he's almost impossible to stop. So again, much like Kohli, he's got one big issue that oppositions are going to target. Rohit doesn't have the best technique against the fast bowlers, does tend to plant the front foot, big LBW candidate early on. Also, when the ball is going across him as well, can be a little bit loose outside that off stump. So that is Rohit Sharma's main weakness. Kedar Jadhav, he did a pretty good job, I think, and he went against his instincts, 40 of 54 deliveries, a guy who loves to score very quickly. His career strike rate is well over 100, and this time I liked how he played. There's been a few times where he's just tried to go from the get-go, even when the situation has called for a little bit of caution, but it seems like he's starting to learn that he needs to play the situation a little bit more came to the crease when India were reeling at 11 for 3, and he played a good hand. He's a guy who plays all the shots particularly strong, square of the wicket, and against the spinners. But unfortunately, he couldn't make his start count, much like Rohit Sharma playing across the line against Stoinis, and he held out at mid wicket. But I like Kedar Jadhav. If he can continue to balance his aggressiveness with a little bit of caution up front when it's required, then I think he's going to be a quality player for India at that number 5 position. MS Dhoni, what more can you say about this guy? He's incredible, and I think all the talk of him being finished has to stop. I know he's 36 and I know he's past his prime. That doesn't mean he's not worthwhile to have in this team. He is certainly still a big asset to this Indian team, and his best trait is playing the situation to perfection. That is what Dhoni does. When he came in, India were 87 for 5. What did he do? He weathered the storm, he knocked the ball around, gave the strike to a rampant Hardik Pandya, and then when Pandya was dismissed, at the back end, he improved his strike rate, started hitting 4s and 6s to finish the innings. It was a classic MS Dhoni innings, and the guy just keeps proving the critics wrong. So well done to MS. Hardik Pandya, incredible stuff from Hardik. Hardik is the ultimate X Factor player in world cricket at the moment. He is inconsistent, no doubt about it, but I think that India don't mind the occasional failure, the occasional questionable decision making from Hardik when they get this at certain times from him. 83 of 66 deliveries. He took Adam Zampa to town, scored 3 consecutive sixes against him incredibly. That's the 4th time in his short international career that he has scored 3 consecutive sixes. That's how explosive Hardik is. Having him in that number 7 position, he can turn games on their head. He has such a great 6 hitting ability. He's a fearless player, and when you're able to hit straight down the ground as a batsman, you're going to do very well because you can't have fielders straight down the ground. He can also hit the slog sweep very well. When you bowl it in that arc, he's going to have a swing, and more often than not, he's going to hit it out of the park. And the thing about Pandya is that he has so much to improve on. He's in the infancy of his international career. Think about what he could be in 5 years' time. Scary to think about. Hardik Pandya, what an incredible player he could turn out to be. Match turner Hardik Pandya. Bhuvneshwar Kumar again showed his quality with the bat. If you remember, scored a very nice 50 in the second ODI against Sri Lanka to guide India home in what seemed like impossible circumstances. This time, he had to play a finisher role, and he did just that. Very nicely done from Bhuvneshwar. 32 of 30 deliveries. Pretty handy for India to have an elite bowler who is capable of scoring runs as well. Now, the Australian bowling, I thought Pat Cummins was unlucky. He was unlucky in Bangladesh, I thought, and he was unlucky today as well. But Pat Cummins, in very difficult conditions for fast bowlers, has been excellent, I think. And you can only imagine how he's going to bowl when they go back to Australia. It's quick, it's in your face, it's accurate, all the ingredients you want in a fast bowler. Nathan Coulter, his comeback was pretty special. We saw that he had a very good IPL. He's coming back from injury, and he did what he's best at, swinging the ball away at pace early in the innings, and he accounted for Kohli, Rahane, and Pandya early on. Very nice from Nathan Coulter. It's scary to think that he's not a first choice player in this Australian 11. The 3 frontline fast bowlers are Cummins, Stark, Hazelwood. That is the strength in depth that Australia have in their fast bowling stocks. Now, James Faulkner, he did struggle on his return, hasn't been in the team since the Chappell-Adley series earlier in the year, and his last 2 overs went for 31. So he wasn't doing too badly, but then MS and Bhuvi took him to the cleaners at the back end of the innings. He's usually an excellent death bowler with that fantastic back of the hand slower ball that is impossible to pick up, and even if you do, so difficult to hit. But this time he was a little bit off. Certainly there's an element of rustiness for him at this level. He hasn't played at this level for over 6 months, but I still think that James Faulkner is a good bowler. This is a guy who was the man of the match in the final of the World Cup in 2015, and while his career hasn't gone the way that most would have expected since that moment. He's still got a good ability in this format as a death bowler and also with the bat in the death overs. Both with the bat and the ball, he's great to have in the death overs, and that is a rare trait in modern cricketers. It's very difficult to bowl at the back end, and it's also a skill to be able to hit runs at will in the back end of the innings. James Faulkner possesses those qualities, and hence Australia should stick with him. It's especially a good chance with Mitchell Starc and Josh Hazlewood out to get him back up and running. Marcus Stoinis, I thought he was quite good with the ball. He's now taking up the Shane Watson role in the team as an all-rounder, and he bowls similar to Watson, it must be said, seam up at a reasonable pace and can get it to swing away as well, and he accounted for Rohit and also Kedar Jadhav. I like Marcus Stoinis. I like what he adds. Obviously, his main attribute is his bowling, but he has a chance now to solidify his place in the team with the World Cup now less than 2 years away. Adam Zampa, he had a tough game today. It was difficult against Hardik Pandya. Adam Zampa has been pretty good for Australia in the last few years in ODIs as the wrist spinner in the team, gets things to happen in this format. And I think today was an off day for Zampa. He's going to be up against it in this series against very good players of spin bowling, but I think he has the quality to overcome that. He's done very well in the IPL, we've seen, but this is a different kettle of fish playing against the Indian national team. So it'll be interesting to see if Adam Zampa can bounce back from this one. Now, going into the Australian innings, I have to say first up, it's very difficult to take a lot from this innings because of the circumstances. The innings was reduced to 21 overs, so you'd think, oh, it's basically like a 2020, except it wasn't. They had 21 overs, that's one over more than a 2020, except there were only 4 overs of the power play to start the innings. Those are the overs with just the 2 men out. You usually get 6 in a 2020. And also there were 2 new balls. You don't see that in 2020. So those things played into the Indians' hands and they worked against Australia. So even though you think 164 to score in 21 overs, that's a very gettable score in 2020s these days, different circumstances made it a lot harder for Australia. As I mentioned, they didn't have as much time to score quickly at the top of the innings, and playing against those 2 new balls makes it a lot harder under the lights against good seam bowling. It's difficult. So you have to take that into account looking at this Australian innings, and given the fact that all the batsmen had to swing for the hills when they came to the crease, I'm not going to put too much stock in this innings for the Australians. But David Warner, he struggled to get going, 25 off 28. Hilton Cartwright on debut, he didn't look good. He made just the 1 off 8 deliveries until he was cleaned up by Bumrah. Stephen Smith, rare struggle for Stephen Smith. He had a poor game. He dropped 2 catches in the field and he only managed 1 in this innings. Now, Travis Head, he made just the 5 as well. And when those top 4 were out, Australia were struggling at 35 for 4 off 8 overs. Glenn Maxwell came to the crease though and provided a little bit of hope with a typical Maxwell innings, 39 off 18. But with the run rate still very steep, he held out, and at that point, it was pretty much game over. The rest of the batting couldn't get going. Stoinis managed just the 3. Matthew Wade managed 9. James Faulkner did a good job, but it didn't mean much in the context of the game. Just reduced the margin of victory. He's 32 off 25. But again, as I said, I'm not going to read too much into the Australian batting given the circumstances. Now, the Indian bowling, they were fantastic. Although there were favourable conditions for them, they did a very clinical job of dismantling the Aussies. Bhuvneshwar, Jasprit, and Hardik did a fantastic job, I thought, as the fast bowling group. Conditions were favourable for them with the 2 new balls under lights, despite there only being 21 overs to bat and 4 overs of the power play. But they put the ball in the right area, and the key thing was their variations. The knuckle balls we've seen, that's a Bhuvneshwar specialty, particularly the cutters, the slower balls. They all brought out a smorgasbord of tricks, and they're all very clever bowlers who can bowl at 140 kilometers an hour. Bhuvneshwar Kumar, especially, you think, is not a guy who can bowl quick, but he can turn up the heat. All of these bowlers can bowl fast, and they've got great control and great skill That's the thing that you need in ODIs. You need great skills as a fast bowler. The format, particularly nowadays, is in favour of the batsman, and as such, you need to be able to outwit them. So I thought they all did a fantastic job. Bhuvneshwar got one, so did Jasprit and Hardik. He got two. Hardik is improving as a bowler. We know he's still not a reliable bowler, but he, just like his batting, has X factor, wicket taking ability. Kuldeep Yadav and Yuzvendra Chahal, excellent from the two wrist spinners. Kuldeep, as usual, excellent control, and he accounted for 2 wickets. Yuzvendra, again, 3 wickets. His specialty is his control. Doesn't spin it as much as Kuldeep, but because of his tight groupings, it's very difficult for the batsman to get him away. Doesn't offer a great deal of flight, difficult to get under him, and I thought he did a good job. Yes, the two of them did go for a few sixes, but it was basically a 2020, so that's almost a given for spinners that they're going to go for a few boundaries. But the big thing was that they took 5 wickets between them to strangle Australia in those middle overs, particularly the wicket of Maxwell from Chahal that broke the back of the Australian chase. And I think the biggest storyline for India in this series is these two spinners basically in direct competition with two much bigger names in international cricket, two of the best test bowlers in the world, Ravichandran Ashwin and Ravindra Jadeja. That's a big thing for India. Who are going to be their spinners going into the next World Cup? We saw in the Champions Trophy, Ashwin and Jadeja couldn't take wickets and they couldn't stop the flow of runs. That was one of the reasons why India were unable to win that tournament. Hence, they're trying some new players. And so far, Chahal and Kuldeep are doing a really good job. Akshar Patel was also promising on that tour of Sri Lanka, but he is out of this series, it seems. He picked up an injury. And I thought it was very interesting to see that when Akshar was ruled out, Jadeja was drafted into the squad. I think that tells you without a shadow of a doubt that Jadeja and Ashwin were dropped. They weren't rested. If they were rested, then someone else would have been called up when Akshar went down. But when Akshar went down, it was his like-for-like replacement in Ravindra Jadeja. There is no resting going on. That is merely a PR spin. And I actually agree with India for trying this ploy. And the stats back up this wrist spinner theory. If you have a look at the top 20 wicket takers in ODIs since the 2015 World Cup, 7 are spinners, 5 of them are leg spinners. The top 3 spinners are wrist spinners, and the top 2 bowlers, period, are wrist spinners. That shows you how dominant the wrist spinners have been in this format for the last few years. The biggest reasons, I've gone through them many times, but because the pitches are getting flatter and flatter, it's harder for the finger spinners to get spin. The wrist spinners can spin the ball even on flatter pitches. Add to it the fact that it's a lot harder to pick the wrist spinner. They have more variation usually than the finger spinner. Also, the fact that they're able to bowl at a really nice trajectory, these modern wrist spinners, that makes it difficult for the batsman to get under. So they're often playing on the back foot, and so it's giving the ball a long time to spin, which makes it harder to play. All these things come into the favor of the wrist spinner. So that is why I feel like India are on the right track, and it's going to be very interesting to see this spinning battle in the Indian team. But that's it for this game. The next game, the second ODI, is at Eden Gardens in Kolkata. That game is on Thursday, the 20th of September. Australia will do well to win that game. They're big underdogs in this series. That middle order, still question marks over that very inexperienced middle order, it must be said. And with Aaron Finch, one of their more experienced batsmen, succumbing to injury, that makes it a lot harder for the Australians. And that bowling attack has been hit by injuries. Mitchell Starc, Josh Hazlewood, and James Pattinson all missing out of this series thanks to injury. So the fast bowling stocks are a little bit weakened. India at home, such a dominant team. So it's an uphill battle for Australia to come back in this series. But I do give them a shot because they have some quality players in their team. They were unlucky in this game because of the circumstances of the rain and whatnot. But I do feel that India will win this series. I'm going to say 4-1. Do let me know how you think the series will pan out. But that is it for me today. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. If you did, you can check it out. We're on iTunes, SoundCloud, and YouTube. All those links can be found on the Twitter page. But until next time, thanks for listening, and I'll see you later.